Last Epoch is a great story of an underdog. An underdog that came a really long way to reach fame and glory. Picture this, a bunch of ARPG enthusiasts just like you and me coming together to create something awesome, to make a game they wish to play. That's how Last Epoch started out, with nothing but a dream and a Kickstarter campaign. I mean, check out these clips from the original trailer for the game. Fast forward to today, and damn, Last Epoch has evolved into this epic adventure with really good looking graphics and gameplay that will keep you glued to the screen for many hours. Now, I know what you might be thinking. There are plenty ARPGs out there. What makes Last Epoch stands out? Why would you try this game? I think Last Epoch strikes a perfect spot in ARPG scene. Up until now, major titles in the genre have been on polar opposite ends when it comes to complexity and mechanics. On one end we have Diablo 4, which is a simplistic and straightforward title from ARPG mechanics perspective. And so it appeals to people who want flashy combat, good graphics, and are not concerned about lack of depth in game's design. And then we have Path of Exile, which is a compelling ARPG, but a complicated and unforgiving title in terms of complexity and character building. PoE is perfect for people who enjoy build crafting and diving deep into the mechanics and systems of the game. What I believe was missing in the genre was a title somewhere in the middle, one that provides very satisfying moment-to-moment gameplay and combines it with approachable yet deep systems, plus rich build diversity. And that's where Last Epoch comes storming in. It lands right in the sweet spot. Whether you are a newbie or a seasoned vet of the genre, there is something here for everyone. And that's what I want us to focus on today, on this deep yet approachable design of the game. So, grab your snacks, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into the world of Eterra. I want to start this review by discussing systems around the progression of our in-game character. There is a lot of choices to be made here, and so it can be overwhelming at first. But bear with me. First you choose your main class, then your mastery, which is like a subclass. Both your class and masteries have their passive skill trees, which give impactful bonuses. There are basic upgrades like additional health or increase to the damage you deal. But we get more creative ones like the ability to dual wield or getting additional effects with skills. Then we have our active skills, which split to base class skills and those assigned to one of the three masteries. The basic class skills unlock as you level up, but the access to mastery skills is locked behind investing points into their passive skill trees. A neat choice from developers was to not lock your skills and passive trees based on your mastery, which means that you can actually unlock all the skills you want, besides the mastery special skill. And now comes probably the coolest part of Last Epoch character progression. All active skills in the game have, well, their own freaking skill trees. This gives us so much customization, it's actually insane. I mean, compare it with Diablo 4 skill customization that either gives us no options or some underwhelming choice of, let's say, 5% damage to vulnerable enemies or lucky hit bonus that will trigger once in like 50 casts and you won't even notice. Last Epoch skill trees have some simple things like changing the damage type of a skill from, say, physical to fire, or increasing its duration, area of effect, you get the point, the usual stuff. But there are also way more creative bonuses which trigger synergies between skills or change how the skill operates. Take Warlock for instance, with her unique class skill that creates a fissure in the ground that spawns spirits which shoot souls at enemies. Looks dope, right? What's even cooler is that I can make the fissure to shoot out chaos bolts, which are another skill at Warlock's disposal. This means that my fissure will benefit from all the bonuses from the Chaos Bolts skill tree, and bonuses on my gear to that particular ability. Personally, I love this idea of synergistic build possibilities in ARPGs, and how varied they are in Last Epoch. So that's quite a lot of cool systems, right? But we are not done yet. We also have idols, which are like Diablo 2 charms. In Last Epoch, however, they have their own idol slots and come in many shapes. And so you have a sort of a minigame trying to fit them like the pieces of puzzle to get the most out of your build. And lastly, we have monolith blessings, which are endgame bonuses your character gets from each monolith you complete. Choices here are quite significant, like 50 or 70% of a specific resistance or damage type. Important to note is that these bonuses apply to your character wherever you are, not only when you are in that specific monolith, which is often a misunderstanding of new players. As you can see, there's tons of ways in which you can craft your perfect character by just focusing on the character's skills and statistics. And we haven't even talked about the items yet. So now let's shift our attention to itemization in Last Epoch, which is really well done. First things first, the affixes system offers a very wide range of stats you can put on the item. It reminds me a bit of Diablo 2 itemization with understandable affixes, yet complex possibilities to max and match things. When it comes to gear tiers, we have typical rarities like normal, magic, rare, unique and set items. Uniques are particularly interesting, adding twists to our abilities or special effects. Some of them are extremely powerful and even build defining. For instance, my spellblade has an ability called Flame Reef, which normally shoots a wave of fire in cone in front of me. There's however a unique ring which makes Flame Reef to have circle AoE around me. Or let's take the two-handed sword called Merophage, which takes the statistics of another two-handed sword when I break such item while having Merophage equipped. Quite cool and creative stuff, right? See, when playing Last Epoch, you will get excited often about unique drops, and that's a sign of a fun itemization design. But our item rarities don't end there, because Last Epoch adds two special item rarities to the mix. The first are exalted items, which are basically rare items with stronger stats and higher crafting possibilities. And then we have legendary items, which are a unique piece combined with exalted item. The balance of gear rarities is for the most part well maintained. The best items are legendary ones, of course, but are also the hardest ones to make. Unique items are very powerful, but your build is very likely to have a lot of exalted items included in the mix. And so, Last Epoch avoids the issues of games like Diablo 3, where everyone used the set items for the most part. The only tier that is really underperforming are ironically the set items. They are very underwhelming. I found myself using only like a couple of set items, and I did it just for a few levels. I really hope that EHG will work on making set items more interesting. Improvements to sets could mean further expansion of already wide range of available builds in Last Epoch, and I think that would be really cool. Speaking about build diversity, how does it look when we combine itemization with character progression in Last Epoch? What sort of character builds can we get? Well, let me show you my druid who focuses on shapeshifting into a werebear. He can swipe his enemies with claws, charge through the map, maul the floor with the AoE attack, and roar to stun enemies around me. The initial problem we have with playing as a werebear is losing rage, which is a resource necessary to stay in that form. Passive skill tree helps me with node that decreases the decay of the rage. It also has a node to prevent losing rage out of combat. When I look into the werebear skill tree, I see a node that gives me rage when hitting enemies, and so for the most part the problem is kinda solved. Further look into the skill tree makes me realize that there are 3 nodes allowing my bear abilities to benefit from other skills. That's a great example of synergies which I mentioned before, and that's awesome. After weighting my options, I choose to go with double synergy for my mauling skill. And so maul becomes my main damage source, being boosted by the power of both upheaval and leap abilities. But there is more to this build. I dropped a two-handed, big-ass, unique mace which triggers Earthquake ability on usage of Maul every 5 seconds. When we combine it all, my Werebear Druid becomes a killing machine, smashing the ground with screen-wide AoE, killing most enemies in just one hit. Playing my Druid looks good, feels satisfying, and involves quite a lot of in-game systems. And this is just one of the examples. I could go with Bear in multiple other ways. And what's crazier is that it's just one of the forms for Druid. He has two other shapeshifting forms of Spriggan and Swarmblade, just as versatile as Bear, if not more. And this is where the game shines for me. Each class has plenty of fun builds to try for you. And so, your problem will be probably that you will have too many builds that you want to try out and not enough time. And not that all the builds and classes look boring. I think it's worth mentioning that not all builds and masteries are equally powerful. Newer masteries like Warlock or Falconer are especially strong. That might be a problem for some of you, especially those who are focused on competitive spirit in online leaderboards. Personally, I don't care about balance. All I want is to have fun. In fact, strong focus on balance tends to result in nerf hammer swiping through games, taking away fun from the builds. I don't like such approach to PvE games, and I hope that 11th hour games does not go that route and keeps bringing underperforming builds and masteries up to the level of the newer ones rather than lowering the power of all builds to some artificial baseline. Now, let's talk about crafting in Last Epoch, which is my favorite crafting system in the genre. See, crafting in Last Epoch is more like an enhancement system. You don't really create new items from nothing. Instead, you change, add, or enhance the properties of items you've already found. Say you got some nice item fitting your build for the most part, with 3 out of 4 statistics being great. Instead of throwing out the item and waiting for the 4 statistics to match, you can just play a roulette and try to remove one of the affixes using crafting system. Perhaps you get lucky and remove the stat that you don't need, giving you a possibility to add the affix you are looking for. It's just one of the examples of possible usages of the system. Overall, crafting gives a lot of possibilities to min-max items you find to tailor them to your own liking. Crafting in Last Epoch strikes a really good balance between involving RNG while giving players control about the potential outcomes, and I personally love it. I have to say that crafting can look intimidating at first. There's a lot of complexity and rules as to what you can do and cannot. If you decide to play Last Epoch, don't get discouraged by that initial impression. Play around with crafting system, read what each rune does, and quickly you will get the hang of the process. Doing so will make your leveling much easier and way more fun. Another important aspect of an ARPG is naturally its endgame loop. Some games shine here, like PoE, others fault, Diablo 4. So how good is the endgame loop in Last Epoch, and how does it work? The endgame loop revolves mainly around monoliths, which are the Last Epoch's version of mapping from PoE or rifting in Diablo 3. Nothing revolutionary about the system, but it's designed in a really neat way. For instance, you can see the potential rewards before you choose which node you run. Each node offers modifiers to loot and enemy strength. These modifiers last only for a couple of nodes, but can have a significant impact on your choices. After a while of progressing in the monolith, you unlock quests that lead to monolith's boss. Once you defeat the boss, you complete the monolith and get its blessing, which is powerful buff that I mentioned earlier. All in all, there are 10 monoliths to be completed, each offering different blessings. And once you complete all of them, the real endgame progression begins. You get access to empowered monoliths with harder scaling and better rewards. Theoretically, you can scale the difficulty infinitely. But the endgame does not end there. We also have Arena, which is wave after wave of enemies to be defeated. It's honestly my least favorite content type in Last Epoch, since I am not a fan of horde modes in general. And then we have 3 dungeons at our disposal. The number seems low, right? But unlike in other ARPGs, each dungeon in Last Epoch is very unique, with its own mechanics and reward system. For instance, Temporal Sanctum has 2 eras between which player shifts to progress through the dungeon. Some parts of the map are unavailable in one era, but possible to pass through in the other. And the final boss also requires you to shift between eras. Defeating the boss allows us to create legendary item by mixing unique item with corresponding exalted piece. Typically, your endgame loop will revolve around monoliths for their rewards, with arena or dungeons thrown in when you want to change things up or want something particular from them. I have few hundred hours in Last Epoch by this point, and I am not yet bored of the endgame loop. I've been enjoying it immensely actually. But I do hope that developers bring some new additions to the endgame with new seasons, called here cycles. Speaking about additions to cycles, we have to talk about 2 factions added at 1.0 release with the first cycle in the game. The way factions are handled gives me much hope for the future of Last Epoch. It also shows that EHG is capable of bringing potentially a lot of innovation to the genre. So, there are 2 main ways people go about gearing their characters in ARPGs, right? It's either self-dropping the items or trading with other players. Both options are available here in Last Epoch. The unique twist are factions, which allow to either participate in a trade market, called here Merchant Guild, or focus on acquiring the loot by yourself with Circle of Fortune, aka COF. Circle of Fortune provides you with extremely impactful boosts to your loot quality and quantity. The trick is that you actually cannot belong to 2 factions at the same time, and there are restrictions in place preventing you from abusing the system by just switching between factions whenever suitable for you. And so, Last Epoch gives us a choice with benefits to both ways of gearing up. For comparison, there is no incentive to not trading in Path of Exile, well, besides saving yourself some nerves and hassle of using third-party applications. As satisfying as solo-found characters are, you actively hinder your progress in Path of Exile by choosing to gear this way, right? In Last Epoch, however, you do get benefits from doing that. And as a result, I have played exclusively solo-found offline since the launch of the game. Part of the reasons were the problems with the launch, which we will talk about later, but the main factor was the novelty of Circle of Fortune bringing new take on solo-found characters to the genre. Both factions require you to progress with them to unlock more powerful benefits. I can only speak for Circle of Fortune leveling, but can confirm that the grind is real. I am currently on the 8th tier out of 10 after playing for more than 80 hours since the game's release. But I don't mind the time it takes to unlock new tiers, since then I have something to look forward to, and I already get quite some benefits that feel impactful to my drops. A topic tied to Circle of Fortune is target farming in Last Epoch. Target farming means being able to farm a specific item in a game. Some ARPGs allow it better, others not so. How much does Last Epoch allow us to target farm? Quite some actually. You can focus on target farming certain item types and rarities, but you cannot ensure the reward will be specific item that you are farming for. First, each empowered monolith has a focus drop of certain gear type, and so you will see nodes showing up with that gear type. Then some monoliths give blessings that provide you with increased drop rates to certain items or affixes, which helps us further increase the odds of getting desired gear. Next, we have prophecies, which are a system of extra loot rewards within Circle of Fortune. Prophecies are basically additional objectives to be completed for bonus rewards. For instance, by defeating boss in certain monolith or completing a dungeon, you will get 3 unique pieces of armor. Prophecies have lenses that allow us to further limit the range of rewards and tasks we will have with them. And so, we end up with a really nicely increased chance to potentially get what we are looking for. Some rare items may still take many hours to be dropped, but at least we have a sense of maximizing our chances to get them. Alright, that was a lot on the topic of systems and progression in the game. Let me sum it up. The game offers a robust character progression system with masteries, passive skill trees, active skill trees, idols, and monolith blessings. The itemization in Last Epoch is really well done, with interesting yet straightforward affixes. The game offers a range of exciting uniques that may completely change how your build works. Crafting is in my opinion the best in the genre and should be used at all stages of Last Epoch experience. The game offers tons of fun and unique builds for all classes, with strong focus on synergy between skills. What Last Epoch lacks in balance, it compensates in power fantasy and diversity of builds. The Endgame Loop is very satisfying and well-rounded, even though the game was just released. The endgame will keep you hooked for many hours if you enjoy the moment-to-moment gameplay. 1.0 version added 2 new factions that drastically change gearing process. Circle of Fortune is particularly innovative system that hopefully revolutionizes the industry's approach to solo found gearing. Target farming is absolutely a thing in Last Epoch. It allows us to narrow the potential rewards to increase the odds of getting the item we are looking for. Okay, now let's shift our attention to the gameplay. If you are like me, then lackluster visual effects or boring abilities to use in general are a no-go for ARPG game. In Last Epoch, I enjoy playing most classes that I have tried so far. That's largely due to really nicely done skills. Each class has at least few abilities that I would like to use. And so, I often have a problem of too many builds to choose from rather than struggling to enjoy the class. And that's a good problem to have. The skills in Last Epoch do not only look good with satisfying animations, but also feel very responsive and got that oomph factor to them. Smacking the floor with my Werber druid feels heavy and impactful. Casting Fissure in the ground with the Warlock makes me feel like I am actually tearing the souls of enemies and tormenting them with horror. Suffice to say, I am enjoying the moment-to-moment gameplay in Last Epoch. It reminds me more of Diablo 4, where using skills is actually fun. It's actually everything around gameplay in Blizzard's title that is the problem. Now I want to shortly touch on the topic of graphics, because over the years a common sentiment about Last Epoch was that the game has good systems, has great potential, and is fun to play, but the graphics are underwhelming. And indeed, the game's visuals used to be below the industry standard. But that time is gone. Now in 1.0 release, the graphics are visually appealing, with reworked initial zones, lightning update, and skill effects upgraded with time. The game is not as good looking as say Diablo 4, but I don't think Last Epoch is far behind. The performance of the game has also been significantly improved over the years. But I have to say that it can be still problematic. Sometimes my FPS will go from 140 to like 60 when there is more things happening on the screen. There's also a problem with what I think is a memory leak, where the game, after playing it for a couple of hours non-stop, starts to drop the FPS significantly. When that happens, I tend to restart the game and it works again very well. It's nothing game breaking for me, but it's an annoyance that I hope will be resolved with time. Speaking about coding and development, we have to talk about the 11th Hour Games, who are the developers of Last Epoch. After seeing time and time again how gaming companies are run in a shitty corporate way where passion seems to be long gone, it's a breath of fresh air to experience 11th Hour Games mindset. From communication to decision making, it seems like developers of Last Epoch actually give a fuck about our experience. It feels like they want to deliver the best product possible. Now, sure, they had a rocky launch with tons of server issues. See, it's easy to be good in communicating with customers when everything is smooth and dandy. It's hard to maintain your composure and integrity when shit hits the fan. And problems will always happen. And so, I'll always look at how companies and people in general respond to adversity and problems, because that's when the true character comes out. So, how Last Epoch developers responded? The developers kept showing accountability for their mistakes and worked to improve as soon as they could while keeping us informed. I actually read full long posts of games director explaining what's going on, what went wrong, and how the situation looks like from behind the scenes. It was actually very interesting to read. Companies don't usually do that. And to be honest, that's the most they can do given the problems. The team could have done what most developers do in times of crisis: throw their supplier under the bus, shift the blame on this person or the other, or just keep silent, afraid to say anything to trigger the mob. Instead, they did their best to keep communication going and keeping us in the loop. I for one really appreciate that, and it also gives me a level of trust in the company, but only time will show if they keep their integrity or fall apart like many success stories do over time. Unfortunately, it's not all perfect with Last Epoch. The game has of course some issues. The first problem that bothered me was lack of accessibility to cosmetics purchased in the game in offline game mode. See, I bought the highest game edition to support the game and show my appreciation to the team. And I was unpleasantly surprised that in offline mode I cannot use any cosmetics that I bought. It's quite a bummer. The reasoning for the decision is also very iffy. I hope that developers will enable cosmetics in offline mode in the future, or that modders will do their magic. Another issue with the game is character path finding. Sometimes your character just struggles to get past some objects. As far as I remember, this used to be a bigger problem in earlier versions of the game. Currently it's not that huge of an issue, but you may notice it especially at early levels. For some reason it happened to me way more often early on, not so much in the endgame. The biggest area for improvement is, in my opinion, in the UI, which could use some love. For starters, there's no UI scaling, which is very annoying. I'm playing on 1440p monitor and I wish to lower the size of various elements on the screen for clarity. This is unfortunately not possible in the current build of the game. Furthermore, UI item tooltips are very buggy. It's quite common that when you hover over an item, you often get a tooltip of another piece of your gear. And it's quite a persistent issue that requires you to keep moving your mouse over other items to get rid of it after a while. And then we have the statistics of your character. The game offers some advanced stats, which is quite cool, but it is missing some basic info like DPS for some skills or some values of your damage stats. As a result, it's quite hard to figure out if one item is better than the other for your specific build without testing it on the dummy. I hope EHG works on this aspect of the game to deliver better UI with further customization options at our disposal and more clear statistics. I also read online about bugs with skills and passive skill nodes, but I have not really noticed any issues with my characters that I've played, so it's hard for me to comment on that. All in all, these issues are not very impactful in terms of joy I get from the game, but I wanted to highlight that they do exist, so you get a fair picture on what to expect from Last Epoch. So, those are my thoughts after many hours with Last Epoch. I have played this game on and off for a few years now, and I am very optimistic that it's going into a very good direction. Last Epoch has potential to bring even more innovation to the genre than it already did, with fresh approach to factions and active ability skill trees. I hope I've managed to convince you to try this game if you like the ARPG genre. Last Epoch is a great game for those of us who enjoy crisp and responsive combat gameplay, while having a deep character customization and build diversity. Right now, it's my favorite ARPG to play, and I hope it will stay like that for a while, or at least until Path of Exile 2 comes out. How about you? What do you like most in Last Epoch? Are you as impressed with the game as I am? Or perhaps you got disappointed? Let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.